mission of the Historical Museum is to preserve anything that's relevant to the Village of Worth.
Simple enough. The oldest piece that I have are
arrowheads that were found mostly over by the Worth Woods area and also the Worth Library.
As the village history, the first settlers came to Worth in the 1850s.
But the village was not incorporated until 1914.
I'd say in the last 2 years, what I've been trying to do is go back to some of the original families, utilizing census documents to find out who lived here, what they did, try to reorganize some of the things that we have collected over the years by putting it into more of a timeline than what has been done in the past. I'm also focusing more on oral histories and trying to gather stories from older residents that are still living now, and by bringing them into the museum to try to capture their story. Most recently, I've been working on a project for the American Legion. I spent a few hours with Vivian Meyer, and her husband is the namesake of the American Legion, the Meyer part of the Mars Meyer. By focusing on volunteer groups that were started mostly in like the 40s and the 50s, you can really learn about the true values of the village. For example, the volunteer fire department, it wasn't just the fire department, it was made up of members from the Lions Club, even from a lot of the women's social groups at that point, the church. I mean, the population at the time, in the early 50s, late 40s, was only around like 2,000, and it made a huge jump to over 5,000 within 4 or 5 years after World War II. A lot of veterans moved this way, but it's very difficult to try to find how everything links together, and the most common thread that I found is mainly through these volunteer organizations. Part of that project is to revamp the look of the museum by adding a little bit more professionally done descriptions, displays, things of that nature. So we really haven't gone too much into it. The Historical Society and I are going to take a couple trips specifically out to Lamont. They have a wonderful, they put a lot of money invested into their displays in their basement of their church, which we're looking at possibly redoing a section to look like Bishop's Store, because that was a staple. But everybody that comes in that remembers the village at that time, they always mention the village, the Bishop's Store. So we're looking at maybe making it look more like an antique store on the inside, because we do have a lot of items in storage that are related to, shopping in a small town. A lot of things from the 50s, a lot of household items. So we're trying to find more of a theme. Another challenge too, we have a lot of veterans relics as well, because Worth has always been a town that has sent people, actually through even the Civil War, off to war. So we're looking for a way to incorporate
the veterans' history in the museum as well.
We have a very, very small group of dedicated people that come in on Tuesdays to help us clip at 10 o'clock in the morning. And in the drawers behind you are all clippings
from every organization in town since the 50s.
It could be a personal item, if depending on what you mean. If it's like a pin from your involvement in a social club, or if it's photos, even if you have photos of yourself playing in your front yard. People don't realize that those background photos, the things that are in the background, are very important to landmarks that may no longer be there. Or like if there was a construction of your home, a yearbook, that sort of thing, we take those, absolutely. I think probably some of the biggest challenges are where we're headed in the future. Especially with tight budgets at this time. And people, I don't know if it's a generational thing, but sometimes the younger generations don't realize how important the smaller things are. Like, just, I guess, trying to find a way to relate the museum to a younger generation is always going to be a challenge. We're trying to come up with new ideas to utilize the internet, through, I know the Historical Society started a Facebook page, but it's more the technical side of things. Nowadays you go into museums and everything's very flashy and audio and, you know, very hands-on, and we still want to try to keep the museum a hands-on program. We have a lot of, like, we have a toy section that kids can come in and play with some old-fashioned toys or pick up an old rotary phone, which I love when they do that, because so many kids don't even know what that is. You know, they don't realize that a phone doesn't necessarily always hasn't fit in your pocket. So, you know, I think the challenges are trying to find ways to bring generations in and have them realize that this is their future. They're making history here every day. You know, we're blessed with this water tower that says the Friendly Village, so it seems like no matter where you go, people always can recognize Worth because of our water tower. You know, having a landmark like that, it's almost like having the world's largest bottle of ketchup, because then it kind of can pique, you know, the interest. You have an interest there, it's just trying to find ways to draw people in and want them to ask questions. Like you said, where did it come from? The last few years, what I've been trying to do, there's several reunions that have come into town, and I'll go out there and see them. There's a little bit more involvement now with some local history groups, sponsored by the library system. So we'll go like to the National Archives, and even there you'll meet people that somehow have a connection to Worth, and then they've come here, they've told their family members. By having more programs, specifically for senior Worth Days, certainly this year we're going to try to go out and set up a booth where people can actually come in. We're going to ask the same 3 questions and see what kind of response we can get. The Wilson family used to be very prominent in the village. They lived on Depot, across from what is now Galemore Park, in one of the historic homes. There's a whole row of historic homes there. And one of the descendants, Bob Wilson, came in and donated what's called a mourning wreath. And it dates back to the 1880s.
It's up in the corner over there.
And it depicts the 3 daughters of, we believe it's Robert Wilson. There were 2 Wilsons there. Actually 3, but the 2 brothers each had families. But Robert Wilson's daughters are pictured in the middle of the wreath. And they all passed away around the same time, like in the 1880s, because of either cholera or dysentery. I'm still looking into that because it's a recent donation. And anyhow, so in this mourning wreath, the 3 daughters are pictured.
And then as somebody would pass away, they would put their photo in there.
But what's so intriguing is it's in such good shape, and the actual wreath around it is all their hair that's been interweaved together.
Wow.
So it's quite a way to preserve family history.
They're literally preserved.
Yeah. I think, you know, as far as politics is concerned, whenever there's an administration change, it's important to have things from every administration. But residents actually donate a lot of their photos. So we have photos even when they were redoing Oak Park Avenue, which, you know, now might not seem such a big deal, but, you know, when you compare these photos from aerial photos from the 50s to what it is now, it's a huge change. The big snow is considered a big event, because you look how many times we actually got phone calls from Oak Lawn to see if we had any photos from the big snowstorm then, or the tornado when that came through Oak Lawn. Environmental changes, when they built the SEPA station in Worth, the MWRD, those like that, when there's dedications. If buildings change, if a building goes down, if a house gets knocked down, those are considered pretty significant.